Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kylie Stam, and I serve as the Program Manager for the Elliott School's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We have a very special event for you tonight. I see some folks are starting to introduce themselves in the chat. Please continue to do that. It's wonderful to have you all here tonight. We have two of our peer advisors who will be helping to facilitate this event today, and of course, our special guest. And so we won't take up too much time. The session tonight will be an hour long. We'll have some remarks from our author and then a Q&A session at the end. So you can actually find the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen and submit any questions that you'd like to be considered when it's time. So that's it for the logistics. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Hagen now to get us started.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to have a great event today. So my name is Hagen Leeds-Richmond. I'm a junior in the Elliott School. I'm a peer advisor, and I'm going to be one of your moderators tonight, as is going to be Amika. Can now briefly introduce herself.
Yes, hello, everyone. My name is Amika F. Young. I'm also a peer advisor and a junior in the Elliott School as well. And I'm just excited for our discussion tonight.
Yeah. So Call Me American served as our summer reading for incoming students this year, and has been incorporated into the lesson plans for IAFF 1001. We're very excited to be able to host author Abdi Iftin as part of this program. This event is going to be sponsored by the Elliott School's Leadership, Ethics, and Practice, or LEAP initiative, undergraduate academic advising, and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, as well as GW's Office of Student Life. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors for making this wonderful event happen. Following Mr. Iftin's remarks, there will be a Q&A session where students can submit questions for our guest. You can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen to submit questions anonymously or with your name included. And then Amika and I will be presenting those to our wonderful guest this evening. And so I'm going to now pass it over to Amika.
Yes, so now I am very excited to introduce the speaker for tonight, author and refugee advocate Abdi Iftin. Born in Mogadishu to nomadic parents, Abdi Iftin survived famine, war, and child soldiering. Thanks to movies available to him, he taught himself English by watching American action films. By repeating and imitating the carefree actors, he earned himself the nickname Abdi American. Through guerrilla journalism, Abdi dispatched stories about his life to a series titled Messages from Mogadishu on American public media. His stories were shortlisted for Peabody Awards in 2016. These stories were later picked by NPR, the BBC, and later This America. After surviving a bombing at his house one evening in 2009, Abdi finally said goodbye to his home country and moved to Kenya, where he and his brother lived as refugees. In an amazing stroke of luck, he won entrance to the US in August 2014 in the annual visa lottery, though this route to America, ending in a harrowing sequence of events that nearly stranded him in Nairobi, did not come easily. Now a best-selling and award-winning author based in the state of Maine, featured on CNN, NPR, the New York Times, Washington Post, and the Boston Globe, Abdi is an advocate for refugee and immigrant rights. He is dedicated to bringing people together through his stories of survival and resilience, and he's currently working on a documentary based on his memoir, Call Me American. So please join me in welcoming Abdi Iftin in our discussion on his memoir, Call Me American.
Beautiful introduction. Thank you very much for everyone who's joining us tonight. It's very exciting, actually, and especially it's more exciting when you know that people are reading your story or already know a little bit about you. Okay, I have prepared some notes here tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of discussion or presentation based on the book as well as the story in general. But I would like to give you an update. The memoir was released or was published in 2018. That's a little over 3 years ago. my process of America, getting to know America itself is still happening, but there is a lot that I have come across that I've learned in the last 3 years as well. So with that being said, I'm going to include a few more details on my perception and views towards the United States of America, the one that we have today. But let me take you back, and trust me, I'm not going to bore you with what you have already read in the book, but I would like to take you back on a journey for those of you who may have seen in the first few chapters of the book, Call Me American. Let me take you back to Somalia, and particularly this place named Mogadishu, which is where I was born. And that is where the story begins for the book. This city had everything that any city in the world could have, and particularly in a peaceful country. Mogadishu, Somalia had all kinds of sports: basketball, soccer, baseball, you name it. It had arts and music and schools and hospitals and all kinds of entertainment. But most importantly, Mogadishu had diversity. There were actually foreigners who were coming in as merchants or doing trades and other stuff. But there were others, as you may have seen in the book, who came to hang out as a summer vacation on the beautiful beach that Mogadishu had and the beautiful Indian Ocean that seems to be warm 24/7. And I've only lived about half a mile from this city. All right. In chapter 2, you come across when I describe Mogadishu with its nickname in the 80s and 70s. Everybody knew this city as the city of Pearl for its beautiful, old, shiny buildings coming out of or by the blue Indian Ocean. And they gave it that beautiful nickname. However, that's all gone in just a few weeks. And this city that was connected to the rest of the world, and it would soon be disconnected from the rest of the world in every possible way. Then now it has new nicknames, as you may have seen in the book. The city of death and the bloodbath, right? So things are changing. Politics change, people change. Society changes and all kinds of things. But what doesn't change is geography. This country and this city still stays the same and the same place. But it has changed. Now, as I read and write this, other books about Mogadishu and my story, all we have left is a history and memories that we brought ourselves with. Well, now, what are the issues that happen that actually force people to change, to move from where they are to another places, right? It does happen even in the Western countries, including the United States. People change. You graduate from school, you're not the same person as in high school. Now you have more experiences and stuff like that. Believe it or not, I actually consider going through a refugee life and a displaced life, even in a war time. Like if I have lived, say, 10 years of a war, I have full experience of what it feels like, what it tastes like, right? Not only that, but you also have the survival skills. And that is something I would actually like to focus a little bit on. Now, for those of you who had seen the book, I have remained in Somalia for 25 years of my life, 25 years of change. And I think each year came with its own pain, but with its own comfort. Now, the rest of the world had only seen Somalia and places like Somalia, including Yemen and Afghanistan and Iraq. And you mentioned all the countries that are out there that you might learn at school as war-torn countries, as countries full of terrorism or, destruction of warlords, all kinds of negativity that does exist out there. And Somalia is very well known, not only for its Islamism and warlord, but also as a piracy. And the easiest example that you can look at is Hollywood. How many films had Hollywood actually made about Somalia? 2 of them. Number one, the 2001 movie, for those of you who had seen this movie know about it, it's Black Hawk Down. And Hollywood had portrayed Somalia as just nothing but women, men, and children all running around with an AK-47. That's what you come across if you actually watch this movie. Now, in 2008, another movie was released by Hollywood, and that was Captain Phillips by Tom Hanks. And many of you might be familiar with this because it had won an award, and it's a famous, famous movie. Well, because of course, Tom Hanks is over there, right? He's leading this movie. But how does it portray the people, over 15 million people who live in a country? It actually portrays not the way that people want to be portrayed. Now, with 25 years of life in Somalia, had I ever considered joining an army? Ever? The answer is no. Had I ever considered giving up of life and hope and dreams and facing whatever dark path that exists out there? No, I have not. And I think millions and millions of young men and women have faced the same choices. People do not want to join a group. So what happens is the minority, the tiny number within every country, are the ones that sort of like occupy the front page of the world's news, right? You may see them on the television because if someone, blows up a bomb, that will be more explosive and breaking news compared to a wedding that happens in a very remote rural life or town in Somalia. So Call Me American, for those of you who have read, it portrays or brings out the human stories that have not been covered in a very long time, right? The human stories. All right, I will challenge you to go ahead and go through the libraries and bookstores and pick up any book written about Somalia and find particularly stories written by either journalists or military personnel who went to Somalia and had written about their own experiences and compare that to Call Me American. And here's what you will find. What you will find is that in Call Me American, it's just a person's story. So what do you know in person's story? You know that this person had actually, like every one of you, loved what? Films and music. And not only that, he also loved to go out with girls, to go out with boys of his, his friends, and go play soccer and dress in every way that he felt. What does all this come under? Freedom. And that was the fundamental thing that everybody was looking for. And I was yearning for it. I wanted freedom. I wanted to be, not to be told what I have to do. And you probably know some of the challenge that I had faced myself at the madrasa, the only schooling system in Mogadishu, where when I graduated after 7 years of beating, that I was actually told to take over and leave the same school. What was my answer? You may remember from chapter 4 or 5, I think. I turned that down. I said, I do not want to continue the practice of beating other kids, but I want freedom of pursuing my own way in the middle of a war-torn country. Yes, you can always speak up. It does not matter what the situation is. And I think that's the message that you actually receive. Now let's come forward, all right? In Kenya, as a refugee, there are no rights for the refugees. You cannot run for office. You cannot apply citizenship. You cannot apply driving license. You can't find a job. What do you have to do? You have to live in a camp that the government runs and the world brings food. So it's like you're sitting in your little makeshift hut And then they give you a weekly ration, and that's all you need to live on. So what's missing here? The freedom that I've been fighting for does not exist in that situation, right? The opportunities that I wanted do not exist. In other words, you're not a human who is participating in the magnificent opportunities that we have on this planet. There are plenty of opportunities for anyone, anybody in this planet. So I said, well, I'm not going to accept that. I can't sit here and waste years and years and years of my life and only depend on whatever the world brings in as a ration, a pound of flour, a pound of sugar. I can't, that's not life. Life is way more than that. Life is about going to school. Life is about finding your own passion, what you need to do and what you like to do. And you need to live that life. And that is where it all started for me. I wanted to do the things that I wanted to do. And not only that, I was determined and I was resilient. And you know what they say? They say the most determined and the most resilient always find a way. All right. Coming to the United States is a different story. You know from the chapters of the book, the moment I landed in Boston Logan Airport, that same night, August 11 in 2014, there was a major incident or event that happened in the United States of America. Michael Brown, a young African-American man, an 18 years old Black man, was brutally murdered by white police officers. Some of you might remember, some of you might not remember. This is exactly 7 years ago. All right, and that's the same night that I came and landed for the first time on a US soil. I did not actually have sort of like an understanding of America's race and racism and discrimination and inequality and injustices. Those were not things that I have ever been taught. And every single book that I have read before I came to the United States had nothing to do with race, because the books that I was exposed to were written by businessmen, and it was all about just normal life. So in other words, for those of us who are not here in the United States, we're actually not seeing the realities that do exist in here. The media that we're exposed to, the books that we're exposed to, and all of that are somehow not actually enough, or don't have, we're not getting those information. So it felt like coming in the middle of a different America. What's happening in this country? Why is a young African-American man, why did this happen? Why are the police murdering him? Like, how do I even analyze the situation? I did not have enough space in my brain that night, because it was full with joy and this like thrill and excitement of, I am here, I made it. This is the land I have dreamed about 20 plus years of my life. Even, as a little kid who was going to the movie theater learning English from American movies. Now was the moment that the dream had actually come true. It was a million times better than winning the lottery, right? That was the feeling of it. And here's the other side. How do you analyze what's happening here? How do you respond to the Americans who are showing frown faces, who are murmuring or talking with each other, sort of like, as closely as they can? And the country was going apart. And that is the night that I came to the country. And I think more surprisingly, I ended up living in one of the whitest states in the United States of America. That's Maine. The second day after arrival of the United States was a lesson that I think I will never forget. I was sponsored by a white American family. I came and they offered me a place at their farmhouse. I'm living upstairs, dealing with a dog, but they took me out for a walk around the neighborhood. Now we're knocking at doors, and the family is introducing me to the neighbors. And I'm meeting one neighbor after the other. And the conversation starts, and we're talking about the Black Lives Matter that's basically exploding on Twitter. And my family's purpose was to let the neighbors know that there is a Black man in town, but that I'm not an intruder, that I live on this property just in case someone has to call 911. And that was quite an experience. What that showed me was, hey, I thought I have perfected my skills of blending in to discrimination, particularly in Africa. And there's a story in my book where I talk about in my country where we're homogenous, we all look alike, but people have been killing each other based on clan system. And even sometimes the accent, whatever accent you speak, the other side doesn't like, and they might kill you for that. So how did I survive through that? I learned the dialect and the accent of the other group. In other words, I learned almost every other accent and dialect that they speak in my country, so that whenever I end up in the hands of the wrong clan and I hear their accent, I quickly switch and speak their accent, and that would let me go through the day. So I have another day to live. Now, when I came to Kenya, you dress like a Kenyan because we all have dark skin. It's easy to blend in unless they actually find you speaking Somali. Now, the United States was a little different. There's no way that you can escape being a Black man. You can't put on a white skin to survive and thrive in this country. And that was quite a shock. It's right in the face. It's like a slap. Now, I've never identified myself as an African American. Never identified myself as Black, because where I came from, everyone is Black. So the word doesn't even exist. We're not using it. We're not saying Black versus white. It doesn't exist. So discrimination based on skin and skin color was not at all anything that I have ever experienced up until I came to the United States. Now, so how do you, the question to me was like, how do you fit in? What do you have to do? What things do you have to do? What books do you have to read? And the more I have picked up books and learned about the history from Frederick Douglass to Martin Luther King Jr. and all the history of 400 plus years of what happened in this country, oh man, sometimes my mother says, I worry that you get killed. And I would say, I don't know, Mom, but I feel that at least in the United States, we have this space to speak up, to say what's wrong, to try to change the community and the society. And don't get me wrong when I say I was shocked. I don't withdraw from my American dream. It still does exist deep in my heart. And what motivates me more is seeing Americans like yourself who are listening and joining us tonight, who are actually saying, I'm here, I'm ready, I will join the fight for change. And this is an amazing gift to me, because in every other life that I have lived in the United States before I came to this country, every other life that I have lived in Somalia and in Kenya, you would not be able to speak up, right? You can't speak up for your rights. That would get you in trouble. You can't speak up against injustice and inequality. But we have, and I would like to affirm this, that we have in this country that space to at least speak up. I think a year into my arrival in the United States, I found myself in between two choices: to disappear and be invisible and do whatever is out there, or to come forward and be as courageous as I can. And not only speak for myself and for my story, but for all those who look like me, who have the same faith and who speak the same language, right? Who come from the same culture, who come from the same background. It's about time that we speak. So what do I do to get that going? And that is the point of writing this memoir, Call Me American. I wrote it in the middle of the last president's administration. And for those of you who remember, refugees and asylum seekers and migrants and Somalis and Muslims, all kinds of things that I am made of was on the news. It could be on the paper, and the president was talking about it. And he had portrayed every single one of these characters as bad, not interested in America, coming here to change our society in the wrong way, or lazy. I mean, all kinds of things that you can use, even bad words like rapist and on and on and on, right? And I would not want to sit and not do anything. So I stood up, I wrote a memoir, and I filled as much information to both send a message that we have beautiful human stories that everyone should know, and that what some of our leaders and the rhetoric that's coming from them is wrong. That's not who we are. And since there aren't enough books out there that you can find at the libraries to get to know about these people, this particular one was extremely important, critical, timely, and engaging. And I wanted to let it out there. So why did I call it Call Me American? I know some of you are like already thinking, why do you have to call it Call Me American? Believe it or not, I call it Call Me American because my nickname, let's go back to when I was 12 years old. I used to have a nickname. For those of you who read the book know what that nickname was, but I will say it. My nickname was Abdi American. So my friends called me American. But why did they call me American? What was America? Did I even know what continent or what direction America was when I was 12 years old? I did not. Did I know how far America was from where I was born? No, I did not. Did I even know that I would, some point in the future, ever end up going to the United States of America? No, I did not know. So they called me American because I watched action films, like action, war movies, and I pretended speaking like them. And I will admit, a lot of swear words, F word, S word, I just threw it out there. And that's why they called me American. They said, you sound like those guys in movies, so you're American. And that's why I call my book, Call Me American. And also remember, when I published the book 3 years ago, 2018, I was not a United States citizen. In other words, I was not able to vote in this country. I was not able to leave or depart outside of the United States and come back to the United States because coming from Somalia, they could not let me back in, and particularly in the last president's administration. I was basically not a full human living in the United States. There were a lot of things that could go wrong, and they could do anything to you. Now, I'm a proud American citizen. I became naturalized January 2020, a little before COVID-19 hit. And I'd like to give you an update. I know so many of you are interested, particularly for those of you who have finished the book. I have a brother who, and I encourage that you read the book, you come across that he and I were just team. We were together, we saved our family, we provided for our family, we would do things together, despite all the challenge that laid ahead, against all the odds. And that brother of mine, his name is Hassan, and he's a year older than I am, is now in Toronto, Canada. Unfortunately, he was rejected coming to the United States. And I think thanks to the travel ban, and that's one of the reasons why they denied his visa and basically his case. But he had arrived in Toronto, Canada, and he's only 10 hours from here. When I became a citizen, I was so excited to travel across the border and take some time with him. But as you probably know, the border between Canada and the United States was closed. So that's an update. My brother is here, and that's not in the book because the book came out before he even made it to the to Canada. So I hope you read my next book, which is now coming together. And my brother and I are bringing all our heads together and pouring all these stories that we have. A few things that I could not even fit in the first book, Call Me American. All right, so now the best part that I'm excited for is the Q&A, and I would a little bit before we get to that, I would like to say a few things related to how I actually sort of like fit myself in today's America, and that I think is really, really critical. Number one, you know that if you're in America and you have a black skin, you can't escape your own existence, right? It's like you can't blend in. I still don't feel comfortable driving around, particularly in certain areas of the state where I live, which is Maine. Northern part of Maine is pretty white. So whenever I go out hiking or cross-country skiing or out kayaking to the lake somewhere up in the middle of the woods, I leave a message to my family, my main family, the family that sponsored me. And I tell them, I will message you every hour. If you don't hear from me, do something. So that means I have an alarm. It's like, oh, connect to your family, just send a message, and so I wonder if any one of you actually lives that life. It doesn't mean I'm freaked out, I'm scared, it just literally means that anything could happen. I can't trust the way of life these days. It's just so scary, and particularly with people being murdered for walking on the just jogging or walking on the roads. All the stories that we had seen. So I have to leave a message to my family every here and there and tell them I'm safe, things are going fine and stuff like that. And they actually truly appreciate it. And I'm sure that your family does appreciate that as well. In other words, that's not the America I ever dreamed about. It's not. It doesn't. I didn't even do this in Kenya or in Somalia. And it's just, why do we feel like we live in a democratic country, in a free country, but why do you have to fear for your life? And that, in case you're wondering and you're confused, and that's actually, I think, pretty much what many Black people, particularly those who live, and I would say Black and brown, those who live in areas where they're minority, these cases are actually true. And for my next book, and these are some of the things that I'm actually including. Okay, so Q&A.
Yeah, Hagen, I don't know if you wanted to just go ahead and reiterate how the Q&A process works first before we start with the questions.
Sure. Okay. So everyone, there's a Q&A feature on the Zoom, so you'll be able to continue to submit questions as we're going. We have a decent amount right now, but I think we definitely have time for some more. So if you have anything, please submit it. And if anything sparks your interest while we're talking, submit that as well. Micah and I are going to be kind of going back and forth, asking some questions. We have a few prepared ones we're going to start with. And then also, if you would like to ask your question yourself, for those of you that have already submitted a question, what you can do is just put in the chat and say that you would like to say it yourself. And when we get to you, we'll call you out, and then you can unmute yourself and read your question. All right, so Micah has a prepared question we're going to start off with now.
Yes. Also, another thing, you can also use the raise hand feature if you didn't type your question out already and you wanted to say it out loud. Go for that, and if we have time, you can say your question. But so for the first question, I know that you touched on this a bit briefly, but how do you continue to respond to the offensive rhetoric towards refugees and immigrants by some US political figures, even now after publishing your memoir?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you very much. I think the best way to do that is to bring out the human stories that we have. I think, unfortunately, our politicians might not know more about the people that they are describing, all the kinds of things that they're saying, for example. And for any American who has a friend from an immigrant community or the refugee community or the asylum community, you come across beautiful stories that do exist in these people, in their families, in their communities. Those beautiful stories, unfortunately, don't go out. They're not seen. They're not in many books, right? And our politicians are basing everything on what they had seen, like I was talking about earlier, documentaries that were made, which sort of rather than humanizing stories of these people, are dehumanizing stories of these people. I mean, watch the helicopters flying over the Haitian migrants at the border, for example. And if you're an immigrant living in the United States and you're watching that image, what comes to your mind is that's how they see us, right? That's how they see a crowd of people living like, animals running around, that's it. But when you go deep inside and talk to these people, individuals, it's a mother who had migrated thousands of miles to get here, seeking a better life. And with those thousands of miles, every single step that she had taken is full of stories and hope and dreams. And that, I think, is the best rhetoric to fight back. Just write about our stories that are out there. I'll give you one example, a quick example. One time I had faced an extreme racism myself, where some guy came up, and because I was speaking my native language, the gentleman somehow said, don't you speak English? Well, I said, I do. And then he said, well, we're outnumbering, like there's so many of us. Why are you on your phone and speaking strange language? Well, I said, I'm talking to my mother and she doesn't actually speak English. But not only that, it's my native language, right? So what that shows you, and believe it or not, in today's America, from either political group, even within the Democrats themselves, right? There's an expectation that you look better if you speak English. You look a lot better if you do things that look like us, which is actually, I think is not correct. So until we actually start humanizing people who speak Arabic, Spanish, not English, just other language that they're so fluent that they can sing in, that they can read poems, that they can, tell their stories. And until we understand that they are as equal as we are, that if you speak English and they don't, that you're better educated than they are. I mean, until we really get over that stereotype and those sort of like understandings, I don't think America will change. Things have to change, right? They have to. And I'm hoping that many Americans need to start understanding that. All right, so now, I went to college in the United States and everything goes in English. Do you know how challenging that is for someone who's not native to English? It's extremely challenging. It's like you're doing 2 times the work of a student who actually learned English. Sorry, not learn English, sort of like we're born that English is their native language. Like you're doing 2 times or sometimes 3 times the efforts. In other words, if you're reading a chapter 1 time and taking notes, it takes me to read that chapter 2 times to get the right sense of like understanding that I want. And then at the end of the day, we're all graduating. We're standing together with these beautiful pictures that end up on Instagram, right? We graduated together, but somehow I think people are not humanizing those stories, this struggle that the uphill battle that people are going through. That is something that we need to talk about in schools, in classrooms, and that's how we humanize these stories. And that's how I think America has to evolve into like integrating and understanding more of these people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for talking more about that. So we have a couple interesting lighthearted questions we also wanted to hear about. So one is you talk about your love for films so much in the book. And this question comes from Jake Miller. We're wondering, do you still have the passion for American movies? And now that they're more accessible to you, what are some of your current favorites?
So Jake, great question. Thank you very much. Nostalgia, I would say that's the word I would use. I love movies. I just love them. You might find me still watching all the movies that I used to watch when I was learning English. The Commandos, the Terminator, Rambos, like all these hero and action movies. And I'm not a big fan of action movies anymore. Like I like to watch other movies that are TV series, for example, that sort of like teach me more about stories that exist in this country. And I just finished some of you might not have seen this. I just finished New Girl. And the reason I got into that was, number one, I've lived in the United States for 7 years, but I still have to learn what it's like to have an American roommate, right? What do they do? What do they say? What kind of things do they talk about? How do you dress to go to a wedding, for example? And I got invited to go to weddings, and I really got confused. It's like, what do you do? What are the processes? Like I'm the kind of person who goes to YouTube and writes something like, how do you go to an American wedding, right? I know some of you don't do that because you grew up with that experience. And sort of like those kind of things. And like I come from a culture, and you probably learned this from the book, a culture where we don't hang out with girls. So I'm not really well experienced in what it feels like hanging out or making friends within a community of women or girls. Like, you know, what are in America, what are the expectations, right? What are things that you can say? What are things that you cannot say? What are the right words, the sarcasm that you need to learn, the jokes that you need to learn? Because I'm not expecting Americans to learn my jokes, my sarcasm. We do have, every single community has some. But like since I am an American citizen, I want to live and thrive in this country. So I'm actually now going to movies, not to learn English anymore, because I feel like I speak good English, but like to learn the culture, the norms, right, within this society. And I think everything that I learn and every single episode that I watch, I pick up a few things that are really critical for maybe the survival as I live through this country. And then I bring that back to my community. I go to the community who doesn't understand English. I go hang out with them. We speak our native language. And I sort of like convey, I say things. This is how the Americans do. This is how you should do when you go to wedding. I was like, what do you even do if your neighbor passes away? Like if a neighbor dies in Somalia, we storm into their house. We don't even ask for permission, for example, right? And I'm sure these are also similar in Middle East and other African countries. When your neighbor dies, you just go to their house and you sit there and you give them a hug and stuff like that. In America, it's quite different. And particularly in rural areas like me, you still have to call your neighbor on the phone, schedule with them. So like, can I come, stop by, you know, whatnot. So those type of things are actually are the main reasons now I watch movies, not to learn English anymore, but like to pick up more things.
Awesome. Okay, so now we have another question from an anonymous attendee. But they say, in your book, you mentioned your hope to one day run for political office in Somalia. Is that still a goal you hold?
It is. It is. I think Somalia needs me. We are the generation that would go back and contribute to Somalia's rebuilding and reconstructing and sort of like helping the society. And finishing a school in the United States has its own advantage because it gives me the skills and experiences that I need to run for a political office and serve for a country. So that is true. When I finished the book, writing the book 3 years ago, I didn't even finish college, but now I'm more, you know, I feel like I have what it takes to do that, but I have not actually yet decided to run for office, maybe at least not in the next year or so, but very soon.
Awesome, thank you. So a couple of people have been asking for updates on other members of your family. So can you tell us a little bit about your sister, your mom, how your dad is doing?
Well, my sister is still married to the same person in the book, and she has 5 children with him. My sister and my mother now live in, you know what a locally displaced camp is? It's like they don't own a permanent house. So they live out in the city, somewhere where a crowd of local refugees come together and they build their own houses out of structures that, you know, sticks and stuff like that. And that's where my mother and my sister are currently living together. And my sister's raising 5 kids. At the moment, 3 of them girls, and none of them is going to school because the school doesn't exist, still doesn't exist, right? Somalia doesn't actually have a a system where the kids can go to school. And particularly if you are a girl, it's a lot more complicated. So the oldest that my niece is now just turned 14. She doesn't celebrate her birthday. It's just not anything that my family does, but I do celebrate with her. I send her $20 as a gift, and she buys whatever she wants, right? So she's so happy that I am here and helping them. So that's my family's life. I would like to say a little bit about how the book has affected their day-to-day lives. It had unfortunately changed in both ways, positive and negative. The negative side is that publishing a book is dangerous, and particularly if you come from a country like Somalia, where people might be looking for you. Your name and your face might, the stories that you write in a book might not be liked by some. And with that, my mother stays low profile. I haven't published any of her faces on social media or on the book, but her name is in the book. So she moves around with my sister. They just moved into a new, they're carrying whatever they built of their house, and they can rebuild it somewhere else. So it's just it's sort of like an easy process. Takes about an hour to build the whole thing. But they move around mostly trying to avoid exposing themselves. So that's the negative side, and it's sort of like unfortunate side. And I feel guilty every single day bringing this more trauma to my family, but I had no choice. I had to publish the book, and I talked to my brother, and my brother said, go ahead, and this is one in a lifetime opportunity. And I definitely considered not publishing it, but by now, who would have read it? Who would have known all these stories, right? So I'm in the process of trying to get them to the United States. It might take another 5 years, unfortunately, but hopefully they will still live long enough for me to see them.
That's great. Thank you on just updating us on your family. I'm sure everyone is very curious. But so another question we got from a few students was relating to kind of your take on US immigration and citizenship policy. Just overall, where do you think the US could improve and how they manage that, and any changes you would make if you could?
Yes, absolutely. Number one, I think the US immigration system is broken. I would say that out loud. I don't think it's following the dreams of our founders. America is founded on immigration, and we have every responsibility to open our doors to the most vulnerable in the world, because that can happen to us tomorrow. What if America starts fleeing? What if America becomes a refugee somewhere in the globe? And you would not want the world to shut its borders and its doors. So that's one thing we really need to understand, that could happen. The people who are fleeing from their countries, this is one thing that I think every single American needs to keep in mind. People don't hate their countries. That's not why they're leaving. People have this attachment to their countries and to their culture and to their traditions. They just love it. But they need to survive. They need to stay alive. I mean, imagine what happened in Afghanistan just a couple months ago when the US Army left. The thousands of Afghanis, and the person who was hanging on the airplane, for those of you who had seen it, and falling from the sky to their death, that person had lived in Afghanistan happily up until the moment when they felt like it was not safe enough. So they would rather die trying to get to the safety place. And if that doesn't show us something and how desperate we are, I don't know when ever else that America will get to know this. So yes, the immigration system is broken. It's broken because our own leaders, you might find senators in the United States of America, some governors in Texas and other places, who say that we're being overrun. I'm not making this up, because that's exactly the words that some of our politicians have used. We're being overrun. Okay, let's do the math. and figure out if we're being overrun. There are nearly 100 million refugees and slash displaced out there in the world. What percentage of those refugees are in the United States? It's less than 1%. Less than 1%. 99% of the refugees in the world are nowhere near the United States of America. Where are they? Pakistan has millions of them. Do you ever hear that? Do you ever hear Pakistani leadership saying we're being overrun? India has millions. Turkey actually recently has got millions of Syrians slash Kurds and others and Iraqis and stuff like that. Do you hear those words? We're being overrun, we're being this and that. No, you don't hear that. Why don't you hear that? It's because the refugees who are coming to those countries are easily blending into the society, building their businesses, building their communities, and they're living a very happy life. Somali immigrants are going to Ethiopia and Kenya. But when the just tiny bit of number comes to our border in the United States, we're freaking out and we're paranoid. And guess what? We don't even have anywhere near the number of refugees that other countries have. So let's just look at those numbers and let's educate our community and our leaders. And I hope they really understand that even if we take the rest of the refugees in the world, we still have plenty of space in this country, and that our economy will increase because data shows that immigrants, the moment they come in, they start contributing. They work at the farms, they work at hotels and everywhere else, and that means there's more money coming in, there's more work, and that's what our country needs. I don't understand the sadness or this rhetoric that's coming from others who feel like they own this country and this country is made for them, that anybody else who's coming into the country is just not right. I mean, I think that's why I feel like our immigration process is broken. And if you actually look at the numbers, how many refugees the United States pre-settles to the country, it's very small. So no, we're nowhere near to freak out. And I would say, President Biden, if you ever hear this message, please bring more refugees, please bring more immigrants to this country. That is what America should be. You help today, they will help you tomorrow.
Thank you so much for speaking on that. I know a lot of us were curious to hear your stance on what can be done with immigration policy in the US. You kind of talked about how everyone has their love for their own countries. And so a lot of people have been wondering, what is it you miss the most about Somali culture? And do you ever feel homesick in regards to parts of your previous lives?
I feel homesick every day. I miss a lot of things. I miss the faces of my family. That's 14 years now, unfortunately, since the last time I saw my sister and my mother. 14 years. I mean, imagine if it was you. What if you had not seen your mother for the next 14 years? The last day I left, I knew this would happen. I knew that I would not be able to see my family this long. So that's one thing. I can't even sleep well at nights because of this continuing trauma of what do they look like, right? What will be, how will I feel like that day when I meet them again? I miss the stories that my mother told us. I mean, I'm not a kid anymore, but those are the things that stay with us, right? The friendship that I built in my community, and even back with my friends, my old friends. Some of them didn't make it, some of them are there. The things that we used to do. So we have a WhatsApp group that we talk about quite a lot in some of the things that we used to do, and it's just this is strong nostalgia that you can't help but feel sad after you hang up on talking to them. I feel sad, I feel depressed in many ways, and traumatized quite a lot. So I think my homesickness usually comes with some trauma. because they related, at least in my understanding.
All right, I think we have enough time for one more question. But so Mirvat Chug asks, now that the book has been successful, have people with similar stories reached out to you? And how does that make you feel seeing your story connect with others?
They did, particularly girls. I have heard, I would say 90% of the people that I connected with were Somali women, and even sometimes Muslim women who say, your book has motivated me, has encouraged me that I can write. So I just finished working with two young women, one from Djibouti, it's a country next to Somalia, and another one from Somalia, and both of them have just as you know, deep sorrow, sad, happy, joy, whatever you can say, all adjectives of stories that they actually have. They put their stories together, and fingers crossed, hopefully a publisher will take up those stories very soon, and they might end up on the shelves. So there's a lot of enthusiasm right after I published this book, that there are many people who, from the same background as I am, who say, yes, you are using the most powerful tool, which is storytelling, and would like to do that. And I help them navigate their way around best ways that they can write their stories. And here's my suggestion. Except for native English speakers, for those of you who speak other language, if Arabic is your native language, if Spanish is your native language, and you really want to write a book, write your book in whatever language that you dream and think. And when I wrote my book, I dream in Somali and I think in Somali, and that is how it happened. So I wrote in Somali and I quickly translated into English. That's how my book's written. Now it's out in 3 languages. So, yes.
Awesome, thank you. We're actually gonna ask one last question.
Yeah.
So Danielle has a really great question. She's also from Maine, and she says, from one Black Mainer to another, how did you find community in the whitest state in America, especially as it relates to wanting to blend in while also wanting to be proud of your identities?
Wow. Well, Danielle, that's a really good question. So, number one, I think in Maine, we have over 55,000, that's a number of immigrants. And slash, it could also be other people of background. So I find my sense of belonging in those numbers, right? I fit in them very well. I found people of the same mindset, people who encourage you, who love you, who respect, who lift you up, who promote you in every way that you can. And I'm not sure, Danielle, where in Maine you live, but if you're around Portland, Lewiston, Augusta area, there are community places or events or things that happen around that area, which I usually attend. And I'm not sure if you're into sports. I would say you could just join. That's how I became friends with some of the immigrant members when I first came. I joined a soccer club and we played soccer together, and we always ended with a hug and friendship. And then we went out and hang out, and we're good friends now. So I feel like we're looking for each other up there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know it's a little after 8 now. Kylie, I'm not sure if you wanted to say, I know there's still also a few questions, so sorry to everyone who had a question that didn't get answered. There were so many great questions tonight.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Abdi, for your time and for joining us tonight. Thank you to Hagen and Amika for facilitating such a wonderful discussion. I agree, looking at the questions, it was very difficult to be able to fit in as many as we did, but thank you all. And to our students who are here, continue having these conversations. Bring your questions to class if you haven't had your class yet. And we just want to say thank you again for sharing your story with us through the book and in in joining us tonight. I'll just quickly ask, someone did ask when we should expect your next book to come out. Is that something you could speak to yet?
Sure, I would say mid 2022.
Great. We'll definitely keep an eye out for that. So thank you again. Thank you to all of our sponsors for helping to make this event happen. Our Office of Undergraduate Academic Advising, the LEAP Initiative, our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and GW's Office of Student Life. Thank you all so much, and enjoy. For those finishing the book, have a great time. And we look forward to engaging with you all again and reading your next book. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much for having me.